The story of house cleaning begins thousands of years ago, when the first humans lived in caves and simple shelters. They had no soap, no detergents, no brooms as we know them today. Cleaning meant sweeping away ashes from fires with tree branches, moving dirt outside, and throwing waste away from living areas. In these earliest times, keeping a space clean was not about beauty but about survival. A dirty shelter attracted animals, spread illness, and made life harder. As human societies grew, so did their methods of cleaning. In ancient Egypt, people used oils, soda ash, and early soaps made by mixing animal fat with ash. Wealthy families even had servants whose daily tasks included sweeping floors, washing clothes, and polishing household items. Cleanliness was linked to ritual and religion, with both homes and temples cared for carefully. In Mesopotamia, homes and temples were regularly swept and washed to honor the gods. The Greeks tied hygiene to health and beauty, and women of the household worked daily to keep spaces free of dust. In Rome, house cleaning advanced even further. Aqueducts gave access to running water, baths were common, and drains carried waste away. Romans used brooms of twigs, sponges from the sea, and vinegar for scrubbing. Their homes, especially among the wealthy, were far cleaner than those that came after the empire collapsed. When Rome fell, much of Europe lost its plumbing and sanitation. The Middle Ages were marked by smoky, dark houses with dirt floors covered in straw. These rushes absorbed food scraps and waste, creating unbearable smells. Instead of cleaning daily, people replaced floor coverings only every few months. Soap was expensive, so most people relied only on water or sand to scrub. Illness spread easily, worsened by poor hygiene. While Europe struggled, Islamic societies during their golden age placed high importance on cleanliness. Partly for religious reasons, homes were built with courtyards and fountains for washing, and washing before prayer was essential. In China, traditions like Feng Shui encouraged uncluttered, balanced living spaces, while in Japan, cleaning carried spiritual meaning. Temples and homes were swept daily, with purity linked directly to peace of mind. By the Renaissance, European life began to change. Soap became more common in Italy and France, especially those made from olive oil. Floors were scrubbed with lye and water, and chimneys reduced smoke in homes, making them easier to clean. Wealthy households had servants who swept, washed, and polished daily. The 18th century brought more order to cleaning. Manuals instructed women on proper home management. Wooden floors were scrubbed with sand, windows cleaned with vinegar, and furniture polished with wax. Brooms improved, made from sturdier materials like corn husks. Laundry was still washed by hand, boiled and beaten outdoors. The work was endless and exhausting, but cleanliness was becoming an expected duty. The Industrial Revolution in the 19th century transformed housework. Factories mass-produced soap, brushes, and tools. Baking soda was discovered as a powerful cleaning agent. Vinegar was used widely for washing. The carpet sweeper was invented in the 1860s, and running water reached more cities, making laundry and dishwashing easier. Washboards and early washing machines reduced effort, though the work remained heavy. For middle-class families, a clean home became a sign of respectability, while servants still carried most of the burden in upper-class homes. The 20th century introduced electricity, and with it, the modern age of cleaning. In 1901, the first powered vacuum cleaner was invented. Though it was too large for most homes, smaller models soon followed. Washing machines and irons became more available in the 1920s and 30s, cutting hours of labor. Advertising began shaping expectations, convincing families that spotless homes reflected happiness and success. After World War II, convenience ruled. Synthetic detergents replaced traditional soaps. Dishwashers and floor polishers entered homes, and disposable sponges and paper towels became popular. Cleaning was no longer just a task, but part of modern living. By the 1970s and 80s, more women joined the workforce, leaving less time for housework. Professional cleaning services grew, and household appliances became faster and more efficient. New chemical cleaners appeared for every purpose: glass sprays, carpet shampoos, oven cleaners, disinfectants. At the same time, concerns grew about the health and environmental effects of these chemicals. Families began balancing convenience with safety. In the 21st century, cleaning has become smarter and more automated. Robot vacuums map entire rooms. Washing machines use less water, and air purifiers clean the air without effort. Eco-friendly products made from natural ingredients like vinegar, baking soda, lemon, and essential oils have returned to popularity. Cleaning is now tied not only to hygiene, but also to mental well-being. Decluttering and keeping a tidy space are seen as ways to improve peace of mind. The future of cleaning will likely bring even greater automation, with artificial intelligence predicting when a house needs cleaning and machines doing the work themselves. Yet despite all these changes, the purpose has always remained the same: to make living spaces safe, comfortable, and welcoming. From brushing away ashes in caves to using smart robots in modern apartments, the story of house cleaning is a story of human progress itself. Long before the bright bottles of liquid detergent and neatly packed washing powders that sit in our homes today, people struggled with one simple but universal problem: how do you keep your clothes, and your living spaces clean? The story of detergent begins thousands of years ago, long before chemistry, laboratories, or industrial companies existed. In fact, it begins with fire, fat, and ash. Around 2800 BC, the Babylonians discovered, perhaps by accident, that when animal fat mixed with wood ashes from a fire, the result was a substance that could help clean wool and cloth. This early mixture, crude and uneven, was not soap as we know it today, but it was the beginning of humanity's long relationship with cleaning agents. The Egyptians refined the idea further. Records on papyrus show that they mixed animal and vegetable oils with alkaline salts to create a type of soap. They didn't just use it for washing clothes and bodies. They used it for treating skin diseases and even in medicine. For them, cleanliness was tied to ritual and health. The Greeks and Romans inherited this knowledge. The Romans, famous for their public baths, were perhaps the first to make cleaning a daily habit for society at large. They used soap-like substances and also relied on natural sponges from the sea, scrubbing with oils and scraping them off the body with curved tools called strigils. For clothes, women scrubbed cloth with water, sand, and sometimes urine, which contains ammonia and acted as a natural cleaner. For centuries, soap was made in homes. People boiled fats from animals they slaughtered, mixed it with ashes from their fires, and produced rough bars or lumps that were stored and used when needed. The smell was often unpleasant, the texture rough, but it worked. Over time, soap making became a trade. By the Middle Ages, cities like Marseille in France and Castile in Spain became centers of soap production. Olive oil was used in place of animal fat, creating finer, better-smelling soaps. Yet for ordinary people, especially in Northern Europe, soap remained a luxury. Clothes were washed rarely, and bodies even less frequently. By the 18th and 19th centuries, soap was more available and began to be seen not just as a luxury, but a necessity. Governments even encouraged soap production, linking cleanliness to public health. But here's the problem: soap has limits. It works well in soft water, but in hard water, water filled with minerals like calcium and magnesium, it reacts and leaves behind a sticky residue known as soap scum. Clothes washed in hard water often came out stiff and gray. For people living in regions with hard water, soap never fully solved the problem of clean laundry. This problem would eventually lead to one of the most important chemical inventions of the modern era: synthetic detergent. But the world had to go through a period of crisis before detergent was born. In the early 20th century, during World War I, Germany faced severe shortages of natural fats and oils, which were essential for making soap. These resources were diverted to the war effort, used in food and other industries, leaving little for cleaning products. German scientists were forced to experiment with alternatives. They turned to petroleum, which was more available, and through chemical processes, they created the first synthetic cleaning agents in 1916. These substances behaved like soap, in that they helped water remove grease and dirt. But they were not made from fat. They had another advantage: they worked in hard water. This was the beginning of detergents, as we know them today. These early synthetic detergents were not perfect. They were used mostly in industry, in factories and in the military, not in homes, but the idea was out in the world. Chemists had found a way to create a cleaner, not tied to scarce natural resources. After World War I, other countries picked up the idea, though soap still dominated the household market. In America, for example, Procter & Gamble was a giant in the soap industry, producing Ivory soap and many others. But even they were keeping an eye on this new invention called synthetic detergent. In the 1930s, the first consumer detergent products began to appear. In 1933, Procter & Gamble introduced Dreft, the first synthetic detergent designed for home use. Dreft was gentle, intended for delicate fabrics, and it had one great advantage: It didn't leave behind residue in hard water. Housewives who lived in areas where soap scum was a constant frustration suddenly had a solution. But Dreft was not powerful enough for heavy laundry. It couldn't remove the dirt and grease from work clothes, children's play clothes, or kitchen linens. The world was waiting for something stronger. The real revolution came in 1946. Procter & Gamble scientists, after years of research, launched Tide, the first heavy-duty synthetic detergent. Tide changed everything. It cleaned clothes better than any soap, and it worked in any kind of water. Its bright orange box became a symbol of a new age in cleaning. Housewives tested it, compared it with soap, and overwhelmingly switched. Within a few years, Tide became the #1 laundry product in America. What began as a wartime necessity in Germany had now become a consumer revolution worldwide. Detergents had another advantage. They could be modified, unlike soap, which was limited by its natural ingredients. Synthetic detergents could be improved in laboratories. Chemists began adding phosphates to make them even more effective in removing dirt. They added enzymes that could break down protein stains like blood, grass, and food. They added fragrances, brighteners, and eventually color-safe formulas. By the 1950s and 60s, the shelves of grocery stores were filled with different brands and types of detergents, each promising whiter whites and brighter colors. Detergents didn't stop at laundry. Dishwashing liquids emerged, beginning with products like Joy in 1949. For the first time, washing greasy pots and pans became easier, as synthetic detergents cut through fat better than soap ever could. Shampoos, which had once been simple soap-based solutions, were reformulated as mild synthetic detergents, gentle on hair but powerful against oil and dirt. Floor cleaners, bathroom sprays, even car washes, all began to rely on synthetic detergents. But the story of detergent is not only about science and convenience, it's also about the environment. In the 1960s and 70s, when people imagine the Mongols, they often think of warriors on horseback, fierce storms of arrows across the steppe, and empires stretching from the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe. But the story of the Mongols is not only about war. At the heart of their daily lives were their homes, the round, felt-covered tents we know as yurts or jurs. And like every human society, they too cared deeply about how to keep their living spaces clean, ordered, and worthy of the spirits they believed watched over them. The way the Mongols cleaned their homes reveals much about their culture, their beliefs, and their way of surviving in one of the harshest environments on Earth. A Mongol home was not built of stone or wood. It was made of a wooden frame, covered with felt made from sheep's wool. This meant it could be taken apart and moved quickly, sometimes in less than an hour. A family might live in one spot for only a season before moving on, following their herds of sheep, goats, camels, and horses. So cleaning for them was not about polishing floors or scrubbing stone walls. It was about keeping the inside of the yurt pure, orderly, and respectful to both the family and the spirits. At sunrise, a Mongol woman would open the door flap of the yurt to let in the fresh air. The smoke hole at the top, which served as a chimney, was uncovered to release the smoke of the previous night's fire. The first act of cleaning was simple: air and light. Mongols believed that fresh air carried away not only the dirt of the night, but also the bad spirits that might linger inside. The hearth in the center of the yurt, which was sacred, was carefully tended. Ashes from the fire were not thrown out carelessly. They were removed with respect, often scattered in a clean spot outside, because the hearth fire represented the life of the family. The floor of the yurt was covered with felt rugs. These rugs were beaten and shaken outside regularly, much as people in cities later beat their carpets. Dust on the steppe was constant, carried by winds, and rugs absorbed much of it. Women would take them out, hang them, and beat them with sticks until clouds of dust rose into the air. This ritual was not only about removing dirt, but about maintaining comfort inside the yurt. A clean rug was softer to sit on, warmer underfoot, and more welcoming to guests. Inside the yurt, everything had its place. The right side of the yurt was considered the men's side, where saddles, bows, and tools were stored. The left side was the women's side, where cooking utensils, pots, and food supplies were kept. At the back, the place of honor, sacred objects, and family treasures were arranged. Cleaning the home meant keeping these places in strict order. To leave the men's tools scattered or the cooking pots dirty was seen not just as laziness, but as disrespect to tradition. Every morning, women would wipe the pots with cloth, scrub them with sand or ash if food was stuck, and stack them neatly. Mongols did not use soap as we know it, but as the Mongol Empire grew under Genghis Khan, These practices of order and cleanliness spread with it. In military camps, rules were strict. Tents were lined up in exact formations. Waste was carried away, and fires were controlled carefully. Discipline in the home was mirrored in discipline on the battlefield. A dirty, disordered camp could bring disease and lower morale, while a clean, orderly one kept warriors strong and ready. Travelers from other lands often remarked on the surprising cleanliness of Mongol homes compared to what they expected from nomads. They noticed that the interiors were neat, the hearths well cared for, and the customs around food and water tied to respect and hygiene. While European cities in the Middle Ages often struggled with waste and foul smells, Mongol camps, though simple, were fresh, airy, and carefully maintained. By evening, when the day's tasks were done, the yurt glowed with warmth from the hearth. Pots were washed and stacked, rugs swept, tools placed in their spots, and the family sat in a circle around the fire. Cleaning was never just about dirt. It was about balance, respect, and readiness for the next day. In the harsh life of the steppe, where winds could whip dust into the air, and herds demanded constant attention, a clean yurt was a refuge, a place of peace. The story of how the Mongols cleaned their homes is, in truth, the story of how they lived. Simplicity, order, and discipline shaped their world. Their cleaning habits kept them healthy, respected their beliefs, and ensured that no matter how far they traveled, their homes remained centers of stability. When we think of the Mongols, we may remember the thunder of hooves across continents, but behind every warrior was a yurt, and inside every yurt was a space kept clean with care. A reminder that even the greatest conquerors in history were still human beings. Returning each night to homes they kept pure and ordered with their own hands. When the first humans set foot on Mars, the images broadcast to Earth were full of glory. The dusty horizon, the strange red glow, the footprints pressed into alien soil. But as the first settlers began to build their homes and adjust to life in the Martian colonies, they quickly realized something that no rocket scientist had put on the cover of magazines. Life on Mars was going to be as much about sweeping, scrubbing, and wiping as it was about exploration. A Martian house, unlike an Earth house, would demand constant cleaning, not because of vanity or comfort, but because survival itself depended on it. The dust was the first and most relentless enemy. Mars is a world wrapped in dust storms, some so large they can cover entire continents, even swallow the whole planet for weeks. The dust there is finer than any beach sand, finer even than the flour in a baker's hand. It slips into everything, unlike Earth's dust. Softened by rain and rivers, Martian dust is jagged, sharp-edged, and laced with toxic chemicals like perchlorates that can damage lungs and poison the body. On Earth, a little dust on the floor might mean nothing. On Mars, dust was dangerous, and so the daily act of cleaning became a form of protection. Every entry into a Martian home began with an airlock. But this was not just a door. It was the first stage of cleaning. Imagine a family returning from outside. A mother, a father, and two children, each wearing a suit heavy with the red soil. As the outer hatch closed, jets of compressed air hissed around them, blasting their suits. Brushes on the floor scraped their boots. Fans pulled the floating dust into filters. Sometimes robotic arms reached out, tapping shoulders and helmets, knocking loose the grains clinging stubbornly to fabric. The children would laugh, turning slowly in the storm of air. But the adults would remain serious, for they knew that if even a handful of dust escaped this chamber, it could harm the air they breathed inside. Once the suits were hung in their racks, each person still paused to wipe down gloves, to check boots, to brush hair and skin if they had been outside without helmets in controlled tunnels. These moments, mundane yet essential, were the first daily cleaning ritual of Martian life. Only when everything was spotless could the inner door slide open, and the family step into the warmth and light of their habitat. Inside, the home did not look like a house from Earth. There were no carpets or curtains to catch dust. Surfaces were smooth, polished, designed to be wiped quickly with electrostatic cloths. The air was always humming as scrubbers worked, pulling invisible particles into filters. At first, the settlers had thought of cleaning as something they would do once or twice a week. Soon they learned it was constant. In the mornings, before breakfast, someone wiped the tables, someone else checked the filters, and another swept the entry mat with small brushes. Cleaning was woven into the rhythm of the day, like breathing or eating. Even food preparation demanded new cleaning habits. Children were taught cleaning early, and not as a chore to complain about, but as a duty. A father once told his daughter, "Every time you wipe a surface, you are keeping our air safe. Every time you pick up a crumb, you are protecting our lungs." For a child, the act of dusting a table became an act of care, not just for the family, but for the fragile home itself. And then there were the windows, the precious windows. Few were allowed in the first habitats, because they were weak points in the walls. But where they existed, they quickly became cloudy, coated with dust from the outside storms. Colonists sent small cleaning drones to crawl over them, brushing away the layers so light could return. Inside, children pressed their hands against the glass, watching as robots danced across the red sky, keeping the view clear. Floors required different tools. Instead of mops or brooms, rolling vacuum bots crept along the edges. Guided by sensors, their motors humming softly. Colonists named them like pets: Dusty, Red Spot, sometimes at night. As people slept, the bots roamed, sucking up whatever flakes of dirt or strands of hair had escaped the day's chores. Waking in the morning to find a bot docked in its charging station with a full dust bin was a small victory, like finding a gift. Bathrooms were perhaps the most carefully cleaned spaces of all. On Earth, one might flush and forget. On Mars, every drop of water was captured, filtered and recycled. Waste was dried, compacted, and sometimes even studied by scientists searching for signs of bacterial growth. Cleaning these systems was not glamorous, but it was vital. A clogged valve or dirty pipe could ruin the recycling system for the entire colony. Families took turns, each week scrubbing the fixtures, wiping seals, checking gaskets. Children might complain, but elders reminded them, clean water means we live another day. There was also a kind of emotional cleaning. Living in a small space on a hostile planet could feel heavy. Dust was everywhere, always threatening, always seeping in. So keeping the habitat clean became a way of fighting back, of reminding themselves they still had control. After long days of work outside, colonists often gathered to tidy together, wiping walls, brushing floors, and then sitting down in a clean, bright room to share a meal. Cleanliness was not just survival, it was hope. A way of saying, we belong here, we can live here. Over time, new inventions made cleaning easier. Nanotech sprays coated surfaces, making dust slide away like water off glass. Sonic vibrations shook particles from clothing without soap. Airlocks grew smarter, blasting away dust before anyone even noticed. But even as technology advanced, the habit of cleaning with human hands remained. A father still showed his son how to wipe a table. A mother still scolded her children for leaving crumbs. In that way, the ancient rhythms of earthly housekeeping carried into the stars. And so in the evenings, as the sun sank low and the sky turned a deep orange, families on Mars sat inside clean homes, their walls glowing softly, their air fresh and safe. Outside, dust storms howled across the endless plains, but inside, the houses were sanctuaries. Cleanliness had become the silent hero of Martian life, the thing no one had cheered for in the beginning, but the one act that kept humanity alive on the red planet. Hour after hour, day after day, the cycle of cleaning continued. It was not glamorous. It was not what people had dreamed of when they thought of space colonization. And yet it was one of the truest marks of humanity. For wherever humans go, whether in caves, castles, or cottages, whether in yurts or skyscrapers, whether on Earth or Mars, they always sweep, they always wipe, they always make a space their own. Mars was no different. Mars would never be conquered by rockets alone. Mars would be conquered by brooms and cloths, by vacuums and filters, by the quiet, steady, daily ritual of keeping a house clean in the harshest place humanity had ever dared to call home. When we talk about the history of cleaning, we often think of simple soap, the kind our ancestors made from ashes and animal fat, something basic and small. But the story of the modern detergent industry is very different. It is a story of science, war, innovation, competition, and above all, of one company that grew so powerful in this field that its name became almost invisible, hidden behind the global brands it created. That company is Procter & Gamble, better known as P&G, the world's biggest detergent producer. The story begins in Cincinnati in the 1830s, when two men, William Procter, a candle maker, and James Gamble, a soap maker, married sisters from the same family. Their father-in-law encouraged them to stop competing and instead form a partnership. In 1837, Procter & Gamble was officially born. At that time, America was still a young nation, and soap was not something everyone used daily. Many people bathed rarely, and laundry was a hard, occasional task, but P&G saw the future in cleanliness, and their early success in soap gave them the foundation for what would eventually grow into a global empire of detergents. As decades passed, soap making grew, and so did P&G. They made candles, they made soap, and they became a trusted household name. By the time of the American Civil War, P&G was already supplying soap to Union soldiers, and that habit of building a connection between cleanliness, national pride, and everyday life stayed with them forever. But for many years, soap still had its weaknesses. It didn't work well in hard water, and it left behind residue. In some places, it just couldn't clean properly. That weakness opened the door for something new: synthetic detergents. The turning point came in the 20th century. During World War I, Germany could no longer rely on animal fats for soap, so their chemists experimented with petroleum byproducts and created the first synthetic detergents. This was the spark. In the United States, P&G's researchers were also looking for new ways to make cleaning more effective. By 1933, they introduced Dreft, the first synthetic detergent for delicate fabrics. It wasn't powerful enough for heavy laundry, but it was the beginning of something revolutionary. P&G didn't stop there. They built on Tide's success by creating Ariel, Gain, Cheer, Bold, and many more. Their marketing machine was as powerful as their science. They sponsored radio and later television shows, weaving their products into the fabric of American culture. In fact, the term soap opera comes from companies like P&G sponsoring daytime dramas to advertise soap and detergents to homemakers. The company understood something important. Selling detergent was not just about cleaning clothes. It was about selling a dream of a cleaner, better, more modern life. By the second half of the 20th century, P&G had expanded globally. In Europe, they launched Ariel in 1967, using enzymes to break down stains in ways Tide could not. They studied how people washed clothes in different countries, designing powders for some markets, liquids for others, and eventually capsules for convenience. Their competitors, like Unilever with brands such as Persil and Omo, and Henkel in Europe, fought hard. But P&G's scale, their research labs, and their ability to spend billions on advertising kept them ahead. Tide became the #1 laundry detergent in the world, holding the biggest market share, while Ariel grew into a leader across Europe, Asia, and Latin America. Behind the scenes, the company's scientists were constantly experimenting. They introduced brighteners that made whites look whiter, fragrances that made clothes smell fresh, and concentrated formulas that worked with smaller amounts. In the 1980s and 1990s, they developed liquid detergents to replace powders in many markets. And later they pioneered laundry pods, small, pre-measured capsules that made washing easier. Every step was designed to keep P&G at the top of the industry. The story of P&G as the world's biggest detergent producer is also a story of scale. Their factories can produce millions